Um, so after that, she won, and there was already two lawsuits about gerrymandering that was going through the courts um, about gerrymandering, about the mapping in Wisconsin. The state legislature in Wisconsin, because of what Protosewicz said during her run, wanted her to step down from even hearing the case if it happens to go to the Supreme Court. She, of course, said no. They decided to do this.
The issue circles around two lawsuits that have not even made it to the Supreme Court yet. Both seek to overturn the Republican-drawn legislative electoral maps created in 2011. For years, Democrats have accused the maps of being gerrymandered, and Justice Janet Protasiewicz called the maps rigged during her campaign. Republican Speaker Robin Vos calling on the justice to recuse herself. Now, the Associated Press reports that Republican lawmakers are floating the possibility of impeaching her. Democrats called it a power grab.
Every legislator must look in the mirror and ask whether they are willing to erase the votes of over 1 million Wisconsinites, including their own constituents.
We asked Assembly Majority Leader Tyler August about the possibility of impeachment.
It's really up to her. I don't think that it's going to come to that, because I think that she'll do the right thing and recuse herself.
Speaking in front of the state capitol, Democratic state lawmakers announced a $4 million campaign they are calling Defend Justice.
If politicians in Wisconsin or anywhere in our nation can undo elections because they don't like the outcome, frankly, what is the point of elections?
This includes having Democratic supporters knocking on doors in Republican-controlled districts as early as tonight.
When you have a political operation saying we're going to go out and knock on doors, which is what you do during campaigns, and campaign to keep a justice on a case, proves our point.
Democrats believe the Republican-controlled Assembly could vote on impeachment as early as this week. With a 65-34 majority, it takes 50 votes to do so. This would bar her from any of her duties as justice until the state Senate had a trial. It would take 22 votes to convict, the exact number of seats Senate Republicans hold. There are other high-profile cases likely to head to the Supreme Court. This includes the issue of drop boxes and abortion.
So, newsflash, they didn't try to impeach her. They didn't even vote on it. This was a fear tactic to have her just don't even hear the case, or if the case makes it to the Supreme Court. Mind you, this is how desperate the Republicans legislature in Wisconsin was to keeping their power. To the point where they knew how one of the judges was going to lean if it makes it to the Supreme Court. Keep in mind, this haven't even made it to the Supreme Court yet. But they're already seeing it going to the Supreme Court. They're already seeing what one of the judges is, one of the judges is going to vote for it. So their scare tactic was, hey, I want you to not be a part of this, step down, let the other ones vote on it. She said no. Okay, we'll impeach you. Okay, go for it. And it literally died after that. They didn't even try. So moving a little further up, this is what happened 2 weeks ago. The cases did make it to the Supreme Court. And here's what happened 2 weeks ago over the holiday, maybe even before the holidays, but here's what happened when it did make it to the Supreme Court.
A decision that is set to shift the composition of Wisconsin legislature. Wisconsin has remained a divided state with its Democratic governor and Republican-controlled Senate and Assembly. Democrats will now have the opportunity to regain the majority as the state Supreme Court is now requiring the legislature to draw new legislative maps prior to the 2024 election. Law Forward, a voting rights advocacy group, and one of the lawsuit's plaintiffs praised the victory. In a statement to 27 News, Law Forward staff counsel Dan Lenz said gerrymandered maps have distorted the political landscape and the organization would be working to draw fair representative maps. In a dissenting opinion, Chief Justice Annette Ziegler argued the deal was sealed on election night, referring to Justice Janet Protasiewicz's addition to the court. Ziegler said their decision to remap Wisconsin was a departure from the judicial role of the court and dangerous to the state's constitutional framework. I spoke with former Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Janine Getzke, who made note of the conservative justice's continued reference to the Court of Four. Getzke said, regardless of the claims, the liberal justices were not acting outside of their authority, going on to say this is simply what happens when you have a shift in ideology on the court.
That's what happens on courts, unfortunately, all the time. You look at what's happened to the U.S. Supreme Court. You know, suddenly the makeup of the court changed and all of a sudden decisions change and precedent gets thrown out, you know, and it's the other side politically.
The court held in its decision that it would work to draw temporary maps, requiring both parties to rely on experts to submit proposed legislative districts until the legislature formally enacts new ones. The enactment of new maps now leaves all lawmakers in the Assembly and a majority of the Senate up for re-election next year, making Wisconsin an even more pivotal state leading into the 2024 election.